Welcome to Obsidian. Let's make a custom Statblock template. Alright, so g'day guys. Tonight we're going to be having another look at the TTRPG Statblocks plugin by the absolute wizard Javelint. If you haven't heard of Javelint, he's the guy that makes a whole heap of the really useful TTRPG plugins, such as Dice Roller, Initiative Tracker, and the TTRPG Statblocks that we're going to be looking through tonight. What is it that this plugin does? Obviously, you've probably seen my video on this before if you are watching this one, but it's the ability to make these sort of stat blocks. And anyone who's come here from a probably D&D 5th edition will probably recognize the fact that there is the ability to have stat blocks in here. There's lots of monsters that are built into the actual the plugin, such as all the SRD monsters, and they come with this nice D&D sort of layout. But one of the questions that we see come through quite often is, can we use this for other systems? And the answer is a resounding yes. It is definitely possible. It used to actually be called the 5th edition Statblock plugin, and you'll see that the folder is actually called that originally. It still is, to be honest. But the plugin itself has been renamed to the TTRPG Statblock plugin so that you know that it can support other systems. Alright, so that's what we're going to be doing today, is going through and learning how to not just use these, because we've done that before in another video, but how to create our own custom version of this, because what if you don't play D&D 5th edition? Alright, now just so you guys are aware, if we go down to settings and we come down to the TTRPG Statblocks plugin, which you can see I do have installed, you can see that this comes with the Fate core layout as well. So that's another option that does come with the layout out of the box. Alright, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. What we need to do first is go ahead and install the plugin. So let's go through and do that. We're going to go settings. We're going to go community plugins. I'm sure you've done this before by now. Browse. And in here we're going to type TTRPG and Statblocks will come up. Alright, so it's by Jeremy Valentine. It's been downloaded 23,000 times. Go ahead, click on that, click install, click enable. Alright, but guarantee you, if you're watching this video, you probably should have already done this. Alright, and if you're watching this video and you haven't learned how to use this plugin yet, I would recommend that you stop and you go back and you watch the original video that I've made on these. Alright, because there's a whole host of functionality that we're not going to cover tonight. What are we going to do tonight is we're going to go into the details and the complexity of how to create our own custom stat block. Alright, so I want to do a shout out to Bruce. He's one of my patrons and he's been chatting with me on the side, just getting some assistance with how to basically get his data import working. And obviously when he came to monsters, he was trying to lay it out manually. And I said, well, why don't you use the TTRPG Statblock? And his answer was, well, because you haven't done a video on it yet. So here we go. He's provided me one of his stat blocks from his system. Now, as you can see, this isn't the original stat block. This is something that has basically been, created in Obsidian by himself to sort of, represent his monster. And this is his apparition, right? So we've got a ghost here. Basically, it's got a stat block there that I can certainly work with. And we want to basically go through and see if we can lay these out. So let's have a look. First things first. What I did is obviously get the stat block that I'm going to work with. From there, we want to come over to a note, any note, make a brand new note, and we want to create the stat block. Now, where did I get this from? If we go to settings, come down here to TTRPG Statblocks. Actually, sorry, I'm doing that wrong. Go to community plugins, come down here to TTRPG Statblocks. That takes us into the README. Now, always read the README, guys, but with something as big and juicy as this plugin, always read the README. All right, I'll say it twice. So what we need to do is we need to come through here and have a look. Now, you can see here there's two ways to bring in a monster. So there's the way to draw it in from the data.json file that exists inside the plugin itself. And that's where the monsters normally reside by default. So all the SRD monsters, for example, are in a data.json file. All right, and you can see here that the way to bring in one of those monsters is just to do this little stat block here and put the monster name, and that will then pull that out. The other way, however, is to come in here and do a full custom monster. And that's what you want here. All right, let's start with that. Do a copy, all right, get that text, let's bring it in. Now, I just want to say here, warning, YAML syntax, right? This is using YAML. The syntax is incredibly important in this, okay? Don't use tabs, use spaces, for example. There's some common errors that are included in here, right? So not putting quotes around parameters with that or star, all right? Just pay attention to it, but come in here and grab your custom data. And then we're going to paste it in. Now, as I said, you can do this on any note, all right? So if I create a different note, you can paste it in, all right? And that largely gives you the foundation that you need to start with. Notice that it puts some extra of these little dash thingies, so get rid of those from the top and get rid of that from the bottom. All right, and if we now come back to preview mode, we can see that that's now sort of rendered. Now, it's not rendered successfully on my screen. Now, the reason for that is if I go into settings, come down to TTRPG Statblocks, you can see here that I've actually set my default for this as the Cyberpunk red layout. But this one particularly will be working on the 5th edition layout. Now, I'm going to change that. Note that when I change the default layout, I do need to use the reload command. All right, so I've just gone to command prompt and gone reload. All right, and as you can see, that then reconfigures the default that you need to use. So I've just come in, I've done that, and now the 5th edition one is applying, just to show you that that's possible. But that's not really what we want. What we need to do is we need to turn something like this into something that will work for our data. So here's one I prepared earlier. All right, so we've got this stat block at the start. All right, you got the dash things at the bottom. All right, they're the ones that we always need to have on the top and at the bottom because that defines that everything between here is the stat block. Every custom stat block must have a unique name, okay? It must be unique. So what I've done, I've just got name and I've got the name of the monster. All right, I've just pasted that in. Then what we're going to do for this purpose, right, and you don't have to do this, is I'm going to define a layout. Now, I'm defining the layout manually in this one here, okay, by using this. You don't need to do that, right? So what you can do is come into the TTRPG Statblocks and you can actually set which one of these you want to be your manual, your default layout, all right? And then all the monsters will use those, all right? So just be aware of that. But then basically what we need to do is come through and replicate the information that's on our stat block in a way. Now, I'm making up the majority of these names, okay? There are a few that are special, so name, layout, image, all right? These ones come with the Statblock plugin, so use those three and use them in the order that I've got them because that seems to work. But everything else underneath this, the level, size, BMR type, right? I've added these in myself, okay? So all I've done effectively is I've used this as a template, all right, on how to enter the data. All right, where I've got a name, I've got a string, right? If I want to have stats, then the format that I would do it would be stats, and then I'd put my numbers in here, all right, leaving obviously the comma and leaving the square brackets. If I want to put in a ability save or something, I would replicate this layout here. If I want to put an action in, I would replicate this layout here. Now, when I say replicate, like if I want to add an action, for example, into my stat block, I will quite literally come over here and notice I press backspace then and paste. All right, so that I get that in there. Now, I've already got that, so I don't need that in this specific situation. What I would do though is just add it at the bottom here, and then I could basically come through and I could give it a new name, action name, and then action description. All right, so that's all you're doing is you're effectively just using this as an idea on how to lay your information out. All right, all of these are effectively just variables. All right, these are the name of the variables and this is the value of the variable. And if anyone hasn't come across the term variable before, it's in programming language, a variable is effectively a bucket of, or a bucket where you put things. All right, a piece of information. It's a box, it's a bucket, it's somewhere where you put a piece of information. So in this case here, we've got a bucket called size, all right, and the value of that is currently string. Obviously, string stands for a word or a sentence, right? It's a string of information, where obviously a number is different. So this is the stats bucket, but interestingly, this is a stats array bucket, so it actually contains a number of results, all right, and they can all be different. That's what I'm doing is I'm coming over here, And we're just basically copying this out. So I've got level, 20, size, medium, BMR type, biped, right? And I've just gone from top to bottom and effectively just written these things out. Stamina, will, and magic, all right? You know, even though there's a break roll here, it doesn't really matter. The actions is really where it sort of gets a bit more interesting. So in this case here, I've got some attacks. All right, we've got an ectoplasm attack that does 134 damage. I believe I don't play the system, so I'm not completely sure. Melee weapon at 124, missile weapon at 114. All you need to do is go through and put those in. All right, and all I need to do in this situation is have one stat block. Ideally, that stat block should do everything that, like all the possible combinations of things that can be presented on a stat block. So let's say there's reactions, right? You would have to have a stat block that has reactions in there. Well, you don't have to, but trust me, it's going to be easier to have a test case that sets everything up for you. Now, it doesn't have to be real. Let's say that you wanted to add reactions in here, for example. Look, there's already a template on how to do reactions. The monster itself doesn't have to contain it, right? You can just create yourself a template that has the reaction name in there, all right? And you'll understand why in a minute. All right, so just as an example on how to do that. All right, so that's how we go ahead and we set up our first monster, okay? And it's very important that we set up our first monster because we're going to use that from this point forward. All right, so what do? We're going to go to settings. We're going to come here to the TTRPG Statblocks section, and we're going to come down to layouts, okay? Now, the easiest way to define a new layout sometimes is just to come to an existing layout and click the copy buttons. So if you're doing this from Pathfinder or Pathfinder 2, I would recommend you probably start with the basic 5e layout and click copy. All right, copy those into, what it does is it copies it down here, and then you can mess with it. You can modify it. If you're doing something that's completely different, you might just want to start with add a new stat block. All right, now I've just started this here, but I'm going to delete this one. We're going to start from the beginning. I did do one last night, but we're going to ignore that. That was just for testing. And we're going to go, let's start with a new one. Now, I'm going to start with a complete fresh canvas. Okay, so click new, and that's now gives us a layout. Now I'm going to call this GURPS 2. All right, just because I've already got a GURPS, I need a GURPS 2 now. That's my name. Oh, that didn't actually work. All right, so we're going to do that again. GURPS 2. Oh, we have to click the save button, okay? Just to call out, you have to click that save button. All right, so now we have the GURPS 2 as a layout, all right? And if I come in here and I click through, you see that that's now not rendering in any way, shape, or form. The reason for that is it's using the GURPS 2 layout, all right? And the GURPS 2 layout doesn't have any content, so it doesn't know what to do with the data. Let's see if we can change that. So we'll come in here, we'll come back down to TTRPG Statblocks, we'll come down to GURPS 2, and we're going to hit the edit button. All right, so we've got the edit button. Oh, did I do that right? Yes, no, we're going to hit the edit button. We're going to hit the edit button, and we're going to click the add block button. All right, so the add block gives us the options of things that we can do. All right, in this case here, what I generally do is I start with a group, and a group is a grouping of information. All right, so it's a section of stuff. It can be more than one thing, but in this case here I've got a group. I'm going to edit this group, and what I want to do is I'm going to click this Has Rule button. If present, the block will have a horizontal rule placed after it. All right, so this line, I like the line. All right, so now we've got a group with a line underneath it. What we're going to do is we're going to go back into edit. All right, what have we got here? Actually, sorry, I need to hit the add button, not edit. We're going to add. And I want to have a heading. All right, so we got the heading, and what we need to do is start defining how this works. So link monster property. The heading of my stat block should be, in my opinion, the name of the monster. Okay, so we're going to go heading, name, save. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to do a quick reload and see if I can break this. There we go. The reload's now made that come up, and we can see that the name is feeding through. So what have we done? We've got the name in here. We've just created a layout that effectively says display the name in the stat block. All right, and it's really that simple, guys. Like what we're going to be doing, excuse me, is coming through here and starting to set these things up. Now, what I'm going to do to make this easier is I'm going to take a screenshot. All right, now I'm using a program called ShareX. It's a free open source program. But what it allows you to do is to basically take screenshots really easily. I find it easier than the Windows snipping tool by far. I'm going to stick that over on my right hand screen because we have to go into the settings page, obviously, of Obsidian to see what we're doing here and configure this thing. So by having it on the other window, I've got quick access to it. Alright, so we come back down here to TTRPG Statblocks. We're coming down here to our GURPS 2. We're going to click Edit. Alright, we've got a name now. Alright. Actually, one thing I'm going to do as well, because I kind of want to have this, is I really want to see what this layout is going to look like. So I'm going to take a screenshot of all of this information as well, and I'm going to move that onto my second screen, just so that I can see not just the text that needs to go into this, but the order that the text needs to go onto, because we're going to be producing this. Alright, so back into settings, back down to TTRPG Statblocks, coming down here to GURPS 2, we're going to click Edit. Alright, we've got a heading, we've got a line, and now what we want to do is we're going to come through and we're going to add another block, we're going to add another group. Alright, so this is where I'm going to put my stats. So what we need to do is start adding to here, and I'm going to add, in this case, a property line. The property line lets us draw a property. Now in this case here I've got level. Now keeping in mind I'm bringing in the data from here, so level, alright, the link monster property. I'm using the exact same spelling of it, so it's all lowercase, so I'm using all lowercase. Alright, but then in here, the display text, I get to say, well, this is what it's going to look like, so I'm going to use level. I'm going to click plus. I'm going to click save. I'm going to click back. Alright. We're just going to probably click something and click back. There we go, that refreshed it. So the old go out of the note, come back in trick, that seems to work a lot with this sort of stuff. Level is now feeding through. Now I did that just to make sure that this was going to work, alright, because I did this last night and it didn't work. Not sure why, had never figured out what it was that actually caused it. But don't do 100 changes without testing to make sure that your change has actually been successful. That's all I'm doing. Alright, so here we go. We now have level. We need to come through and add another one. So I'm going to go property. We're going to go size. We're going to go save. And we're going to go again. Alright. Now this is relatively repetitious. There's the word. You're going to keep doing this over and over and over again. Alright, BMR type. And we'll put a space on the BMR type. Alright. Again, I'm just going to come back here and click back, make sure it's working. I'm just a little bit nervous after last night because I got all the way through this video and found it was not working. Alright, but it seems to be completely fixed tonight. Alright, so let's go through and just do this quickly. We've got BMR type, we need to now add BMR. This is a relatively boring type of stat block, to be completely honest, like it's very simple. Click and add, we're going to do initiative. We're going to do DB. In my fat fingers. We're going to do hits. We've got encountered. It's helpful when like the way you've spelt the variable is exactly the same as the way the headings, because then it's just cut and paste. Outlook. And we're going to do one more, which is our treasure. Alright, we saved it, we go back, we're going to click back on our note and backwards. Alright, let's just check here. So we've got our level, size, BMR type, we're missing BMR. So let me just go back and check BMR, I was sure I put that in. No, I managed to get rid of it, so we're going to add another one. So this will be a good little lesson because you can do this. We can come in here to BMR, alright, and we can actually drag it by grabbing these lines and putting into the position that we like. So it goes BMR type and then BMR, initiative, DB, hits, encountered, outlook and treasure. Just do a quick test to make sure that's working. Looks like that's all there, so we now have that information that we need. Fantastic. Alright, so that's the stats. Now I wonder if we could add maybe a subtitle here that says stats, so that someone knows that it's the stats. So let's go add, what do we got? Got a subheading. And drag that to the top. And let's edit. Are we going to link the monster properties? We don't need to in this case because I just want some text. Text separating, I want to say stats. Fallback. If not present, this text will be displayed. Now, because I'm not pulling it from a property, I don't want it to display the fallback, so I'm going to get rid of that. Alright, conditional. We don't need it to be conditional. We want this to be added no matter what. There's no rule underneath it. Click save. Click back and forward. Oh, no, it did not work. I have found these to be a little bit dodgy in that I can't figure out how they work. It's probably just me, to be honest. Let's try this one, a text. We're going to do that. Section heading, we're going to go stats. We don't want that line. We're doing the same setup effectively. Going to delete the subheading. There we go. Let's go backwards and forwards. There we go, stats now appears. So looks like text is working quite well for just a standard sort of, you know, just a subheading for you to use inside of here. So you can use that. Alright, so now we've got the stats section. That was relatively simple. For anyone not following along at home, like all we did was basically link all of these elements here into here. Now we've got an image here. Ooh, it would be nice to have an image, wouldn't it? So let's go settings, come down here to TTRPG Statblocks, come to our GURPS section and edit. And what we want to do is we want to have it up here somewhere. So let's add an image. It's putting it on the same line. I don't really want to do that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is going to go add block and we're going to do an inline group. Now, a group goes vertical, an inline group goes horizontal. So let's go inline group. We're going to drag that up to the top. Yeah, you're going to let me in. Drag it up to there. We're going to edit this. We're going to put the ruler underneath it. And then I'm going to drag the heading in here. And I'm going to drag my image in here. And then I'm going to delete this one. Alright, so you can see that the inline allows me to lay out obviously horizontally, which is really quite nice. Alright, let's go edit, link monster property. Well, we're going to link it to image. Alright, conditional, this block will not be added if the associated properties are not present. So if there's an image, we don't need to see it. Show advanced options, that's for dice callouts, we do not need that. Has a ruler, nope, there we go. So we'll save it, we'll click backwards and forwards. And now we have a monster. Now, note that I added this image to my vault last night. All I did was take a screenshot of the little section of that monster's face and save it into the vault. I called it apparition.png, well, just I renamed it apparition. So now that linking works fine, and as you can see, that looks quite lovely. Now, if I didn't have this line, what would it look like? There we go, it just takes it straight away. But we'll leave it in there because that looks awesome. Alright, so now we're going to do the resistance rolls. Alright, so it's another section. We're going to come in here to our GURPS 2 layout. We're going to add a horizontal rule to this block. So they've got a line. And then underneath that, we're going to try, I'm actually going to try and do an inline group here. No, I'm going to do a table. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. Link monster property. Actually, no, table won't work because I've got 3 separate things. What I'm trying to think about is I'd like to have, well, actually, sorry, this one here, have these in some sort of horizontal line, just to have a more complex layout for you guys, to be honest. I don't know if it's necessary based on this type of layout, but it'd be nice to have something just a little bit more complex. Alright, so let's go through and let's try an inline group. We're going to add a property to that property line. Alright, we're going to add another property line and add another property line. I'm going to try to do these things all in the row. Now, I don't know if this is going to look absolutely atrocious, but let's have a look. So, stamina. I broke one. Then we're going to come in here and do will. And then we're going to change the last one to magic. Alright, let's have a look. How horrendous does this look? Does it work? Does it not? There we go. Stamina, will, magic. That looks pretty good. It means it's taking up a whole lot less space than it possibly could. So, you know, quite happy with that. Alright, let's come back in here to the GURPS. We're going to come in here. I'm going to edit this current and I'm going to stick a rule underneath it because we've now got through this section and this section. And we want to come in here and we want to add the attacks. So let's come through. We're going to come in underneath here. We're going to add a section, or a group, sorry. Alright, so now we've got a group, and in here we're going to add, what have we got? So we've got heading, image, inline group, property line. We've used property line a lot. Saves, spells, text, and traits. So I think in this case here, the one that makes sense for me probably might be the traits. So let's go through and enter that one, and let's have a look and see if that works. So traits, we're going to link in here, the name, alright, is the actions. So let's type in actions, call it, what are we going to call it? We're going to call it attacks. Alright, conditional, this block will not be added if the social property is not present. That's good, so if they don't have any attacks, they won't see it. Or what does this look like? Alright, we've got our attacks in there now, and notice that that automatically brought in all 3 attacks. The reason why it did it is I've linked actions, and actions has 3 actions underneath it. The plugin's smart enough to go through and obviously add that for us. So, alright, there we go. We've just we've added in, well, to be honest, our first section, right? So let's go through. We're just going to add the reactions just for the purpose of this video. Obviously, they're actually not required in this case, but let's just go through and have a look. If we go edit, we're going to add the rule. All right, just so we've got an extra section. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to add in, just for the sake of it, let's try saves just to see what happens and see if it's any different. All right, so we're going to link the monster's reactions. We're going to call it reactions. I'm going to make it conditional so it doesn't appear unless there's data in the actual stat block that says I need this. I don't need a rule underneath this one because it's going to be the last section of my stat block. Just so you are aware, the show advanced options does have dice callbacks. Alright, so I'll run the callback and use the return values for the dice settings. Alright, I recommend you go and read the readme if you want to mess around with that. Alright, what does it look like? Oh, we got reactions there. There's no data in there, so it looks like that's a smaller section without the attacks. So that's the difference there. Now, I'm just going to remove that because I actually am planning on exporting this and providing it to Bruce, so he doesn't have to do it himself. We're going to come in here and go edit. I'm just going to remove this section, and I'm going to remove the has rule from here. All right. And there we have our very first custom stat block. All right, so as you can see, it's probably like it's a bit of trial and error, right? You basically, it's a 2-step process. You're coming through here, and you're basically copying the custom TTRPG Statblock template into a note, all right? Then you're coming through and you're just modifying it, right? So if you have a custom tab block that says, This is, I don't know, reaction, just for the sake of it, right? You create a variable in there, all right, that's the first bit. Then you got the colon, and then you've got the value. All right, that's it. So you're just basically taking a stat block, copying it in this method, making sure that there's a name, a unique name. You don't need to define the layout unless you are planning on not using the default layout. If you're going to use the default, you can just get rid of this. All right, add an image if that's what you want to do. It's not necessary, but then start going through adding these, adding your actions, adding your reactions, whatever. All right, go through and design it in the same format that's been provided. Now, just a reminder, YAML is incredibly sensitive, and just to show you what I'm talking about, right, the tab here is not supported. Now, just so you can see the difference, see how here there's a dash, but here, all right, there's a line. That's how it stands out to me, that is wrong. You might not have that with your theme though. The ITS theme is kind of amazing with some of the stuff it does, so it helps me sort of see things, I think. Anyway, that's what you're doing, creating that. Then you're creating a custom TTRPG Statblock template, and you're basically just going through and linking these things backwards and forwards until the layout suits what you're after. Okay, so now we have our very first custom stat block. All right, we've got one monster, we've got one stat block, and away we go. Where do we go from here? Because obviously you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, I've got to get all of my monsters in. All right, just so you can understand this is possible, what I recommend you do is you click in here and you go save to bstree. Okay, and when you do that, that saves it into the data.json file. Okay, and what that effectively means, we'll do it over here actually. If we bring in our monster template, alright, which is this old method here. Alright, we can now bring this in. I'm going to use that same name. Alright, you can see that now links it. So now instead in my other notes, and it could be obviously any other note, we can just put that stat block, monster, and name, and that will now bring in our stat block because it's saved to the data.json file. Okay, now what that purposely means, right? So there's a few things you could do here. I would probably use the json.csv importer. Alright, and one thing you could do is you could create a whole heap of notes that are laid out like this. Okay, laid out exactly like this, where you would have your name in your CSV file, for example, and it will come in the other one like that, right? And you bring it in and you use it. Now, anyone who knows about the JSON CSV folder probably knows what I'm talking about there. You can go through and you can create it that way, so you have a whole heap of notes that will be laid out like this, and then what you could do is you could just go through each note and click save to bstree, and then that will be added. That is one way. It's possibly a harder way, which be you could convert the data to a JSON file dynamically. That's getting a lot more complex, I'll be honest, and like for some of you data guys, you'll be like, oh yeah, I can do that, off you go. If you don't feel that way, just by me saying that, I would say probably not for you. Give it a bit of time. Like I would go this method here of importing it into your notes. Now, you don't even have to save it technically to the bstree. All right, like that's up to you. You could do that at a later point. But if you just had one note per monster that was laid out like this, and just to throw some ideas out there, like what if you also had, the description and the lifestyle, under here in actual some nice laid out areas. That could be cool as well. Now, when I'm going through and doing my monsters, another thing I like to personally do is I like to have the encounter block. Alright, so in this case here, what I would do is I would add an encounter block to my note. I would have one, just like this, alright, and then what that does is that adds this here at the bottom of the stat block, so that now you can add that to combat as well. So that's another benefit of obviously using the save to bstree method and mode, is that whole initiative tracker will now function effectively for this. Now, I haven't played around with that, and I'll probably need to do a separate video there on whether or not that will work out of the box with our custom template. It probably won't, probably need a little bit of messing around. But just a heads up that it is certainly possible to mess around with that. Alright, that's how I would do. I've created the data for my first monster. I created my custom TTRPG stat block. I now know that there's a way to get my data in, all right, using the JSON CSV importer, and using that, assuming you've got all your monsters in some sort of CSV table or JSON file, you can go ahead and you can do bulk monsters. And Bob's your uncle, off you go. Now, I would like to do a call out here. So if you go to the settings and go to community plugins and down to TTRPG Statblocks, that will take you to the README where there is a link to the repository where this plugin lives. Alright, so it'll take you to GitHub, and in here there is two sections that you as a user need to know about. There's the issues section, okay? The issues is a place for you to raise issues, alright? Javelin is a very busy man these days, so he's got quite a few issues open, but he's gone all through all sorts. Another place to get support for this is to come into the Obsidian members group, come down here to tabletop games, and inside of there you will find a thread called the Javelin plugin support thread. This is by far the best place to come if you need support with any of Javelin's plugins. As you can see, he's responding to us regularly. He's basically available to help us with our issues, and he's very quick to push updates if he needs to. So don't come to me asking your questions, right? Because I'm not the developer of the plugin. I'm just showing you how to use it. Come in here to this channel, and it's not just Javelin who will respond. Like, chances are I might respond, or another member of the community might respond as well. This is a fantastic place to come get support. The other section worth knowing is the discussion section, and this is effectively like a forum board, I guess you could say, where people are asking questions. But you can come in here and have a look, see some of the things that have been talked about previously, but primarily there's a section here for layouts, and that's a previous thread that Javelin has created. And what this is a place for the community to share their custom layouts. So you can come through here, you can browse through, and you can see the different layouts, all right? You can see the data that is required for that, all right, and the JSON template that is required to basically add these things. Now, there's some instructions up the top on where you need to add them. So the custom layouts are stored in the data.json file inside the plugin folder, which is located here, all right? Now, just be aware that you need to obviously have a look at the structure of the data when you copy it in. All right, so just be careful when you're messing with JSON. You can basically copy the elements in, but if it doesn't match the right format, you might have some issues. With Obsidian, that would tend to reset the data.json file. All right, so just be careful. Always take it back up before you make any changes. But you can come in here, you can have a look. All right, you can download these examples. All right, and you can add them to your own vault if you want. Or you might just use this for ideas. All right, come in and have a look and say, oh, looks like it's possible for me to lay the information out in this way. Like, look at this thing here. It's got like an example of almost everything you could do in this tool, I imagine. All right, so it's a really good way to come in and learn about the different examples. And if you make something cool, come back and share it with the community, guys. Absolutely, that's what we're here for. All right, so anyway, that's just a heads up that that is an option. Obviously to assist you with making your own custom TTRPG Statblock layouts. So there we go. Anyway guys, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope you find it useful. I'm rather looking forward to seeing what you do make with it. Please do come along to these socials and obviously share it with us. But outside of that, if you are enjoying these videos, please do like and subscribe. I certainly appreciate every single subscription that I get. And a massive huge thanks to my Patreons. I will be sure to post the code for this into the Vault shortly. The Vault is something that my Patreons get access to, that has access to all of my test material that I use on my videos, so that you can just come in, copy the code, and off you go. But there'll also be copies of the text over on the Patreon post as well. So we'll make it available for everyone. All right, so outside of that, guys, have a great day. I will speak to you on the socials, and enjoy your weekend.